Hey, y'all, Allison here. I wanted to quickly thank you for listening to our podcast. I know you're about to get a lot of valuable information from it, but I also wanted to hop in and share with you guys a free SOP, which stands for Standard Operating Procedure. We use this SOP every single day in our agency to authentically grow and engage our audiences on social. It is 1000% free, and I'd love for you to have it and use it in your biz as well. So just go to umaimarketing.com/engage to go download. All right, cheers. Welcome everyone to the UMAI Social Circle, where we talk about CPG marketing to help business owners and marketers alike grow. This is Karen and I'm Allison. We are the co-founders of UMAI Marketing, and today we have Jason Jones. He is an entrepreneur extraordinaire and CEO of Exo Protein. I added a little flair for you.
Good to be here.
Thanks for joining us, Jason.
I appreciate the invite. Good to see y'all.
Yeah, so a little bit of a background. Jason and I met while he was the president and co-founder of Vital Farms, my first real CPG job. Jason, can you tell us a little bit about co-founding Vital and what those early days looked like?
It's hard to believe it's been 11 years, I think, since Matt and we started the company. So to be clear, Matt and Catherine had the farm. So they purchased the land in 2007 and had chickens that they had put out to pasture, quite literally, with the idea of producing a better egg. In late 2008 or 2009, I met them, heard about what they were doing, heard about these birds that were running around outdoors in South Austin, and that just sounded like something that the world needed. So I met Matt out at the farm and just loved what they had started there, and we formed a company, and the meager Jones nest egg went into the company as our working capital really for a while, and we set out to bring that really honest and authentic, very small farming method. We wanted to, how do you keep it small and true to the ethos of high animal welfare that's centered on the life that bird got to enjoy, in contrast to factory farming, which we're probably all familiar with by now. But how do we do that and keep it honest, keep it really legitimate on the farm, but scale it up? And, the early days were more humble than you would believe. There was a lot of mistakes that we made, but we really figured out on the farm what it meant to raise a bird outside. It's very contrary to how pretty much any other egg at the time was being produced, and found some great partners in different parts of the country where it wasn't quite so hot and dry, and that worked out well. We were able to find some good partners, some good supplier farms up in the Northwest Arkansas area. That's really the first place we went, and climate worked out really great, and we found some willing partners who would do things our way, and worked out a model that was really beneficial for them. Karen, you remember we were always talking about our stakeholder model, and that version of conscious capitalism that really it's not just all about the profit and the bottom line and making the shareholders wealthy. There's nothing wrong with any of that, but business can and should be so much more, and I think we're all acclimated to that now, especially in the natural food space and here in Austin, where everybody seems like purpose-driven and mission-minded, and we can go sell a lot of product and do well for ourselves, but we really are making the world better. And anyhow, we tried really hard to embody that from the beginning of Vital, and I give that really purpose backbone that we always worked off of. I give that a lot of credit for the success that Vital has seen, in addition to the wonderful people we had like yourself who were part of that crew in the very beginning, and then kind of in the middle bit, and now today in its current incarnation. There's great people walking around who are championing that very important message that we can do better, and we ought not have to compromise the well-being of another sentient creature to get cheap food. And so it feels good to do that, and really it's validating because customers are out there willing to buy these products and usually pay a little more for them. And we did that at the right time and the right place with a lot of the right people like yourself. So it's been quite a run.
Saying a lot of nice things. But so, Vital Farms really did champion the term pasture-raised. It was something that everybody else was cage-free, they were free range. And what do you think Vital did so right in making it such a huge explosion of a term and a way of raising animals?
Yeah, that was a very conscious decision. I remember having a discussion with Matt very early on. How are we going to talk about our product? What is the label claim or the term that we're going to use to talk about this stuff? How the birds get to live truly every day. And it was always pasture raised because that felt like a term that had not been adulterated yet. You got to rewind, 11 or 12 years from where we sit today. The concept of even grass-fed beef was not nearly as prominent and as part of the vernacular as it is today. So we needed a term that hadn't kind of been bastardized, unfortunately, by larger producers. Cage-free was a thing back then, and that's arguably, a step up from being in a cage, but still, it's not a great way to live if you're a laying hen. And then there's free range, which conjures up a certain, I think, a mental picture for most people until you really get educated on the matter and you realize that means you have access to the outdoors, but you may not be taking advantage of it, or it's not really a nice lifestyle. So pasture raised was, it was really, as of then, it was undefined, and we saw that as we definitely needed to claim that term and be very proactive in defining it. So, education was always arguably what we were doing. We were marketing, but we were really educating. Not very sophisticated, but we were really honest about it. I mean, we were always talking about transparency and authenticity, and somebody had a question about what did pasture raised mean, and we would tell them, and we got as specific as they would want to. You can't put all that stuff, on your carton, but it needed to be somewhere for the consumer who's interested. And we would tell them whatever they wanted to know. We would even talk about some of the, less shiny parts of farming. There's, the chickens don't live forever, that kind of thing. What do you do with them when they get some age on them? And we would just be transparent. And I think we got a lot of credit for that. But, it was much more about what does pasture raised mean than it was about Vital Farms, the brand, in the early days. And, people didn't really know about us yet. I think today we've advanced quite a bit, although there's still loads of room, for people to be buying better eggs. But, when you're a new brand, you can do what you can to get your name out there. And we had a great logo and, imagery and stuff that you were doing on social, Karen, was really getting us out there in a big, big way. But, there's a lot of people, a lot of consumers out there. And because Vital Farms wasn't recognizable yet, we would feature that term, pasture raised. And so, yeah, we definitely were more about what does pasture raising mean than here's our cool brand. Let us tell you about ourselves. It was more, let's describe really this farming method. And that was at a time when everybody was hungry for more information. Michael Pollan had been writing his books for a while, and we'd seen some documentaries, that were telling us we needed to be more careful about the food choices we were making, how we were voting with those dollars and that kind of thing. And we were there to meet that education, not starved, but hungry consumer, and, take them wherever they wanted to go. And thankfully, I think pasture raised now stands up as a term. It has not been kind of greenwashed or homogenized in any way. I think people see that now. You'll see it on a carton of milk. You'll see it on butter and eggs, obviously. And I think people really do know now that basically that means the animal got to live like it was intended, running around outdoors, at least during the day. So we were a part of that, I think. Not all of it, but I'm really proud of what we did.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good. So I wanted to ask, when was Vital Farms? When did y'all found?
2009.
2009. So when you guys were founding? Wow. When you founded Vital Farms, were you looking at other CPG brands that were also as transparent as y'all, or were y'all kind of carving that path?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was definitely the early days of the industry, and by this time in natural CPG, I think Vital is one of the pillar brands, I would say. Well, there wasn't a lot of this going on. I mean, you had Organic Valley, you had Neiman or Nyman Ranch. I've never actually known how to pronounce that. You got the sense that they were doing things right, and then there've been other brands like Maple Hill up in New York doing really amazing, truly grass-fed and pasture-raised dairy.
Love their milk.
Oh yeah, the cheese is like so good. It's like different from the cheese we grew up on. Something's different about how that cow is living, which is a good thing, but it's a different taste profile. But yeah, there weren't a whole lot of models, honestly. Really, we were always very careful, and this can be a tough kind of a needle to thread if you're a natural, organic, better for you food company. You need people in certain cases to understand kind of the dark side of what you are an alternative to. And in our case, it was our chickens don't live like this. They have it really good. And if you were a chicken, you'd want to be on a vital farm than, opposed to a big factory situation. But you don't want to lead with the negative, and you want to have a positive message that talks about the good aspects of what you do. And it's tricky. I mean, Karen, you remember this. We needed people to understand where most of their food was coming from and what that was like, and then present a better alternative without having kind of a downer message. And, I think by that irreverence and a bit of the humor that we established, I still remember stuff you were doing with hashtags and stuff, put an egg on it and stuff like that, kept it light, but also got people to think, because consumers in the age that we're in, with all of the information that we have and questions that get raised that maybe 10, 20 years ago just wouldn't happen. If you grew up eating out of a Campbell's soup can like I did, we were there to meet that. And now it's everywhere. I think especially in our neighborhood or neck of the woods of the industry here, with all of the better for you concepts and brands that are getting launched, it's a great time to care about what's going into your body, what you're feeding your family and your kids and that kind of thing. So I think all of us say this a lot, we're all doing the good work from the ground up, changing an industry for the better. We're not depending on some government agency to change a law or something. We're just putting better alternatives out there for people, and they go for them once they understand why it's worth it.
Yeah, and I think defining the term, setting really stringent standards and abiding by them and sharing them transparently, I think that was such a huge portion of people's passion. They believed it, And I mean, like little touches like the Vital Times in each carton. It was just like, even while you were growing and the brand was growing, there was still little pieces that made it seem really like small farm. And I think that appeals to a lot of people, while being honest too, because the eggs do come from a lot of small farms. So very cool. I did have a quick question about like logistics and off of marketing, but the breakage, the refrigeration, looking back on it now with all the brands that we've worked with, I'm just like, how on earth did y'all handle that? And what would be your best advice to an entrepreneur that has glass jars and they experience a lot of breakage and challenges logistically?
Yeah, man, it turns out when you take an egg and ship it across the country, lots of stuff can happen, huh? And we would have kind of bouts of this where a truck driver just wasn't careful, or maybe the road was icy because they were, coming through the Ozarks or something. And as it turns out, eggs are fragile. The first thing that you've got to do is to plan for it. You don't want to be building your, starting your brand, coming up with your unit economics and telling a buyer, here's our pricing and, this is what we'll give you in trade spend. And you can't forget about spoilage of any type, whether it's something gets broken in transit or it gets hung up or it's not moving and it, goes out of code dating while it's sitting in a warehouse somewhere. You need to plan pretty conservatively, especially when you're small, because you just don't have the scale to smooth out bumps like that, and they will come. So I guess the first thing I would say that may sound somewhat intelligent anyway is just, plan for it so that your model accounts for, a healthy degree of that, especially in the early days, because issues are going to come. And, I've worked with companies like you. I've done a lot of consultative stuff and mentoring younger entrepreneurs or just growth stage companies. And there's some unfortunate stories where, what it cost you. So you come up with what the economics you think are going to be, and this is how much cash you're going to need to keep it all going. And you didn't plan for the $80,000 chargeback you're going to get from a big grocery customer if any number of things go south. And, there's kind of the front end and the consumer story and the branding and all that. And then there's the reality of you can't run out of cash. And so planning for that well ahead of when you're going to need to get through that batch of broken eggs or expired product, or your co-man put your labels on upside down and it's just going to take 3 weeks to get it redone. Stuff happens, and that's just the struggle of needing to have good partners and be able to kind of control your destiny a little bit. It's just harder to do when you're small and in the early stages. So I don't know. The first thing you should do is plan for things to be a little rougher than you think they should.
Cool. Well, segueing out of Vital and into your consulting work that you
Mm-hmm.
just mentioned, what were like some of the biggest pain points of the entrepreneurs that you worked with? Like, what would you just hear constantly?
Well, entrepreneurs, especially kind of the more, I'd say, visionary types, they're their own breed of cat. And, I think it's really hard for anyone to be a super well-rounded, I guess you'd say, leader, where you come up with a concept, you can breathe life into this thing, you can sell the shit out of it, whether it's to a consumer or a buyer or people online, and then also get all of those nuts and bolts we were just talking about, where the rubber meets the road, much less the economics of the exercise, and you're out raising money and trying not to run out of it. Keep your investors happy, whether it's your uncle or, some equity firm. So there's a lot of disciplines going on there in this exercise. And I guess one thing I've come up against more than once is just a founder who birthed something into the world, and it definitely has its place, and they have some level of momentum, but it can be hard for visionary types to get out of their own way, if I'll say that nicely, and, either take advice about, hey, I can see kind of around this corner because I've been to this movie before. I think you should prioritize this and maybe put a little more focus on, I don't know, getting a good accounting system underneath you, or maybe getting a better co-manufacturer because this one's totally killing you. It just reads like a book, even though it may not be that clear to you. It's rare is the visionary who is also a great operator. And so that's advice I would often end up, hearing myself say to somebody is like, hey, it's time to go get maybe somebody who really, really has moved a lot of stuff around the country before, and not, just somebody, a friend or relative who you've put in this position, or an expert in accounting who actually understands CPG and trade spin and the games that UNFI will play with you and how they extort you this way and that, instead of the guy who's done your dad's taxes for the last 20 years. Like, yeah, he's an accountant, but he doesn't understand this industry. So I guess knowing when to bring in seasoned help in certain disciplines and from the industry, that's something that I think it probably takes everybody a while to learn, but the quicker you do, the quicker you, like I said, can get out of your own way and, kind of start delegating to people who actually understand a certain function better than you, because it's quite enough to be a visionary and put something new out in the world.
Have you seen a lot of great entrepreneurs with a lot of great product fail because of that in your time as a consultant?
Yeah, fail. I guess there's a spectrum of that. I mean, I've seen a lot where they should be much further down the road than they are. By the way, I'm not trying to come off as some expert who would do everything right or knows all the right moves. I just sure don't. But
who does?
Yes.
Nobody. But I've seen businesses fold for sure because you just run out of cash because you weren't planning well, or you weren't focused. Another thing that happens a lot is being so eager to launch your next product line when you have way more room to just go do what you're already doing much more deeply. And those are things you can get kind of a sixth sense for just being in the industry a while. But yeah, I mean, unless you have a billionaire backer who just keeps writing checks, and I've actually seen that happen before too, which is, you could argue, equally unfortunate, because sometimes things just need to run their course and get cleared out of the way. But it usually does come down to the economics one way or the other, and it's a ruthless game. I don't think it's quite as tough as, say, opening a restaurant, where I guess what I've heard is 90% of those don't hang around. But yeah, it's tough like any industry. There's a lot to rope together and get right, and you have to be in a favorable set of conditions. I won't call it luck, but you could look at Vital, and we put this out in the market at perfect time. We were really just ahead of the crest of this wave of awareness and desire for something better. We were also in Austin, so right up the road, you have Whole Foods. And then an hour the other way, you've got HEB. And, you're in Texas, and I was talking about this earlier today. There's such a pride for whatever it is that makes Texas, Texas. And, I was talking with somebody earlier who spent a lot of time abroad in the first part of their career, as did I. And we're just saying you could be in a bar in Roppongi, in Tokyo, and somebody hears you from Texas and you've got something to talk about, because that's like its own brand. And even within that, Austin, as we all know. And so not sure where I was going with that, but.
So you're saying if you have a CPG brand and you don't live in Austin, you better get down here quick.
One way of looking at
Austin.
We're not going to mention that city outside of Denver that shall not be named, but
yeah, no.
Oh, so I went to school.
You were smart.
It's a nice place.
I think I would check that one out too if I had it to do over again.
Yeah.
But what was your background before Vital? Were you in CPG? Were you just interested in CPG space, or what were you?
You were just interested in chickens,
or do you like eggs a lot?
I just couldn't get enough eggs in the morning. Maybe, I don't know, wandering but not lost. I didn't have a background in agriculture, didn't really think a great deal about the food space. I guess my journey, I always knew I would peel off and kind of do something more for myself as opposed to being in a larger company. And I guess in 2008, I had been at Motorola, which was a Fortune 50. You're talking 40 plus billion in revenue, 150,000 employees when I joined. And that was amazing for a lot of reasons. Learned so much, and it was a great, in some senses, place to kind of come up and cut your teeth. But I always knew, because it's been in my family's blood, we've always just kind of done kind of our own thing, I suppose. And finished my grad school up in Chicago, and we just wanted to be in Austin. And so, we got down here mainly because we just loved the town and loved the vibe and the energy that was here. And we also knew it was friendly for young business. And that certainly proved to be the case. What I really knew I needed to do differently was I needed to care about what I was doing when I popped out of bed in the morning. And in a big, massive company, it's easy to feel like it doesn't really matter if you do what your function in your cubicle is. I couldn't deal with that anymore. It was soul crushing.
Real quick, what were you doing at Motorola?
Man, everything, because I would get bored. So I started out in finance. I did audit. I got into like a risk management, kind of a strategy role for the CFO, traveling abroad a lot, which was super cool, especially before family and stuff. But then I got into supply chain for a couple of years. And then my last role there, I was managing the global marketing strategy for mobile devices.
Wow.
And it's a fancy long title. What it meant was that I was super frustrated because we could all see the smartphone was coming. This was, iPhone launched in 2008, and we just knew that the wrong people were driving there. We were over-engineering products and totally missing what the consumer really wanted. And a lot of us knew that, but weren't able to impact it due to the culture of that once great company, very unfortunately. So anyhow, that really kind of, I guess, teed me up to say, enough of this. I need to control my own destiny more, and I need to care about what I'm doing, and that I needed to be advancing something important in the world, and I just didn't feel that was. And so getting into Austin, was part of another a young venture, kind of an international tourism play with some friends. It was doing well, but it wasn't going to scale quickly enough. And that's when I, like I said, met Matt and Catherine, and the farm they had started, and I guess the bones of that brand. And we, kind of formalized it and grew it from there. And what I knew was, it's kind of funny. It was more of a heart decision than a head one. I was that early consumer, who was looking for something better and preferred organic. And this was before gluten-free and all of these other merit badges you can throw on something. But just kind of being that consumer, I knew there was a place for it without having any sophisticated market research or anything. We just had a napkin, and on the back of that, it showed that, hey, if we get a little slice of this, if people are willing to pay, and we found out very quickly they were. So anyhow, I wasn't a farmer, but I also wasn't, I guess, I don't deserve credit for much. Maybe I do for at least being humble enough to kind of have had a really nice, secure, high-paying job and fancy degree from Kellogg and whatnot. But, you fast forward a couple of months and I'm out kicking around in the dust, chasing chickens around with a fishing net, quite literally.
Really? How you catch your chickens?
The longer the handle on the net, the better, because they are fast.
Wow.
Oh yeah, we went through a lot of
like a
nets.
bull skimmer.
That would have been smart. And they were cheap, man. We were going to Academy like twice a week to buy more nets. It was ridiculous.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's so many stories, but you got to be humble enough to go knock around in the dirt in 100 degrees and figure out what the hell does a chicken need when it lives outside, especially down here, and go to the farmer's market and schlep your eggs that you're really proud of. You can't really be above anything when you want to be part of getting something off the ground. And yeah, it just always from the beginning felt really good to be in the food space, because we can all relate to it. It's all, in times of COVID, it's essential, right? If there's anything essential, it's this. And, to be elevating that and improving, I really do believe, the quality of people's lives and health and wellness and, our consciousness too, depending on what you believe. I mean, nobody would feel there should be more suffering in the world, right? So how about we don't cram chickens into let's cut off the front of their face and cram them into a cage with 8 of their friends. That's not a good way to live, and we can do better. And I think it's a cool time to be alive, because there's a lot at our disposal that lets us make advancements in the world again from the ground up. And particularly in the food space, the barriers are low. Anybody can, come up with a healthier version of something in their own kitchen and then take it to Wheatsville. Like, that's a beautiful way to move through the world. And, there's all kind of rewards out there for us, but, we're making the world better. I really believe that.
I like that. And I think there's something to be said about making a business plan on a napkin. I feel like that's a recurring thing. A lot of great businesses come from a napkin. So
it's
maybe
funny.
That's the goal.
A good buddy of mine, he's from Zimbabwe, but he's been living in London or outside of London for most of his life. But he gave me a book called The Beer Mat Entrepreneur. And what they mean is like the little coaster that, your pint sits on in the pub. But great. And is basically exactly about that. And I suppose I've taken advantage of some of the highest forms of business education, where I got to go to school and things. And bottom line, none of it's rocket science. There's formulas and, fancy methodologies and models and whatnot. But yeah, it doesn't have to be super complicated. It certainly wasn't for us at Vital. The main thing you got to do is put something out there where people are going to really go for it on its own merits. If you're having to market too hard, y'all probably know this better than I do, is, to a degree, the product really needs to sell itself. Otherwise, it's going to be pushing uphill pretty hard. So anyway, it's neat because we get to tinker around in that space in the food world, and it doesn't take years or millions of dollars to come up with something great and differentiated.
Yeah, well.
And drink more beer, by all means. You'll be a better business person.
I mean, I love the humble aspect. I remember one thing at Vital where Matt O'Hare, you guys were having interviews and some guy came in a suit, and it was immediately, he was like, no. He didn't care what the guy had to say. It was just like, no. So I mean, true to the roots. I mean, true to the farming roots. I appreciate that.
Yeah, like
so,
enough
know
with
your audience.
Yeah, know your audience. That's important. One takeaway from this: know your audience.
We thought that guy was going to be too high maintenance for us.
You don't even remember what I'm
He
talking
doesn't
about.
I remember interviewing you. I actually do.
What was Karen wearing? Like overalls and I don't know, or farmer.
I had a piece of wheat coming out of my mouth.
Like spot on.
It wouldn't have been a bad move. I can't say I remember that, but I just remember you leaving, and then, you remember who else was probably in the room, and we just kind of had a powwow after we probably gave you, I don't know, a dozen eggs and said, thanks for coming in.
It's a 6-pack.
Sorry.
So I can tell how you felt about me from that.
Times were tough. Maybe we were sold out. Look at it that way. But yeah, I just remember looking around and everybody was like, she's exactly what we need. And of course you were, and helped really take our online presence and really the face of the brand, if you think about it, for probably most people anymore. I mean, I don't know so much about eggs, just categories, certain ones are more, that's probably a little less prone to D2C, exploration, but anymore, I mean, you have to really, the front of your store is online, and that's the first exposure most people are going to get to whatever it is you're offering. And yeah, you're a big part of the reason we've been able to, grow Vital and get to where it has. So,
Jason, this isn't about me. That's very nice, though.
certainly not about me.
Well, it is. So I personally, we're friends, and I don't even know how you ended up at Exo. So can you talk a little bit about your new venture?
Exo Protein.
Yeah, so I'm a sucker for something that really is disruptive, I suppose. I so really was neck deep in Vital, kind of running the whole ball of wax for most of the early years of it, and then we started bringing on people who were just had a lot of potential to take the thing forward, probably in ways that I just couldn't have. And certainly I was also really tired and kind of worn out. It takes a lot out of you, especially when you don't have a lot of equity money behind you to go, have some of the things that are nice to have when you're trying to scale quickly. Anyway, I took a bit of a break, and thankfully things aligned for me to be able to do that. And, I had missed an awful lot, kind of family stuff. We have 3 kids by now, and all of those came after Vital. And so anyway, was able to just kind of decompress a little bit and decided, yeah, I definitely don't want to leave the food space. There's just too much good stuff going on, and my heart is here. So I would work with kind of in an advisory or consultative or mentor capacity, a bunch of brands across categories, really learned a ton. And I think hopefully had some nice impact along the way. But I guess in that period, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I got to know the founders of Aspire Food Group. And they are Canadian, but they had located the company here for the same reasons that many food companies want to be established here, because of, the network and other things. Anyhow, their purpose is to solve for, all sorts of problems across, the global stage. The idea about having access to great quality protein in turbulent times, whether it's, climate or economics or population or whatever. They had won $1 million in a business competition that Bill Clinton handed them a check back in, I think, 2013 to go explore, hey, can we help feed the world with great quality protein and in a really rounded nutrition offering through insects? And they had been hard at work ever since, working out the R&D and in all the manufacturing capability and in production. This is new to the world in one sense, at least the way they've come across it, in kind of a modular, scalable, very economically efficient way, in a way that had never been done. So basically, they have achieved a great deal in a matter of, I guess, 5 short years. They've done what probably took the poultry industry 50 to do, and that's to, bring the grow out cycle or the lifespan of a mature, in their case, cricket, to, maturity in basically 30 days, down from 60. And so they've made massive leaps forward from a technological standpoint. And I knew them to be just amazing humans. That's something that it really matters who you're doing something with as much as what it is that you're actually pushing on. The people are everything. And I just had loads of respect for them, just as humans, and as well as what they were trying to accomplish in the world. And anyway, about this time last year, I kind of reconnected with Muhammad, one of the founding team, and basically was giving him some advice, kind of how to approach the consumer space. And it just, long story short, sounded like a really interesting challenge that I don't know, wanted to put more time into. So that evolved into me coming on to the Aspire Food Group team as the Chief Growth Officer, to basically try to figure out that, really the sales piece, but the consumer piece. It's one thing to produce all this stuff, and we're the leaders in the clubhouse globally in how to do that at scale with great economics that get it down to where it can compete with almost anything, and as a protein ingredient. But the question still remains, and it sounded like a fun one to me, to try to figure out, well, how do you, convince the Western consumer to go for this stuff? Because there's obviously that stigma there. And the thing is, there's just tons of really amazing reasons why it does make sense. And I wanted to think about really the marketing puzzle that presented. And that's what I've been doing for 9 or 10 months now with our Exo brand. And We've done a ton of very deep primary consumer insights work that we now kind of have in the hopper, as well as our experience of selling the Exo line for years now. And we're kind of in this innovation and product development phase where, we're not out here saying this is going to be $100 million market in 2 years. I don't think it's there yet. But, we're trying to be thoughtful about how we can position and then present this in formats and in a format and brand that maybe make the most sense and can maximize on what we understand the TAM to be, as well as selling it into the pet food market where that's not going to be nearly as much of a challenge, and we've already kind of done a good job with that. So it's a fun one, and I know it's a little out there still for some, but we're going to get you. You're going to come around to it. Just a matter of time.
Tastes like a corn chip.
And for people who maybe don't know what Exo Protein is, it's cricket protein. I think y'all have crisps, you have flour and bars. Is that right? And now you're in pet food space.
Yeah, that is a good synopsis. We recently discontinued the crispy line though, which was the actual whole cricket
roasted
season. Yeah, it was not because people didn't like it. Actually, it was very kind of problematic from a supply chain and production standpoint. And this is one of those choices you make when you need to focus. And we needed to focus on stuff that we can just make with our powder or flour, which is just a kind of a roasted and ground up. It looks like, white flour or protein powder. And we're not really limited as to how that can get applied. And so, but we have the Exo line of bars. There's protein and energy bars, and they're relatively really high in protein, and it's a complete protein. It's kind of the same protein profile in terms of the full amino stack, all 9 of the essentials, as you get in beef or pork or other kind of livestock based proteins, but it's much, much lighter on the environment and our resources, and so less that it requires as inputs to make a pound of that. And it's also a lot less harmful gases and things that are the result of the production. And so it's kind of the environmental footprint of plants with the nutrition of animals. That's one way to look at it. And we're just trying to figure out what really we should best go do with that in a way that, navigates that stigma and addresses it and educates. And there's going to be a lot, I think, that we learned on the Vital journey that will come to bear here, but no final answers yet, but just telling you right here, remember this, it's coming. It will be a thing. It is a viable, it's the most responsible form of protein we can take in. And, our job is to make that, I guess, in the way that we define pasture-raised and animal welfare and, quality in that part of the store. This is a viable option that we need to take seriously, for ourselves as well as the earth.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, if you just go down to Waco's Hollywood movie theater outside, there's a ton of crickets that I'm sure
go harvest.
You could grab.
Yeah, send me an address.
Okay.
If you go to Baylor, how do you even know that?
I'm from Waco.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
we got a pickup. We could head up there and.
Oh, they would love
for
y'all to swing by.
We'll get our nets from the first Vital farm, and.
I know there's a lot of similarities, between Exo and Vital. It seems like. But I kind of just have one more question. You talked a little bit about the barrier, like I'm sure there's a big barrier to entry for consumers, especially Western consumers. I'm sure, taking into like the flour maybe help, but what other ways have you solved that challenge for someone to go try a cricket?
Well, I guess one response is we don't think we fully have yet, but one thing that kind of across food is that it has to be delicious. So taste is kind of the table stakes. And we've had some formulas that we had inherited for the bar line, and we've been tinkering with those quite a bit to improve the eating experience and the flavor, as well as the nutritionals and the macros and things. We have a protein, our protein line is going to be 14 grams of protein and only 3 grams of sugar. So you get into the space where that's appealing to people on all sorts of, low carb diets.
What does the calorie look like for that? Like calorie count?
It's under 200. So it's, I'm telling you, it's quite potent nutritional.
It's not going to hurt your tummy like whey protein, and it's a
No,
lot
in
better.
fact, yeah, it's so cricket powder is prebiotic inherently. So
Ooh.
it's actually really great for digestion and gut health. And the fiber content is something that's kind of a bonus. We're actually getting to be kind of deficient across the board as a nation, I think, with respect to fiber. A lot of people are anyway, in the way, similar to like vitamin D and some other things, just due to the way we eat anymore. So there's a fiber, a prebiotic content. There's, more iron than spinach, and great B12 and omega-3s and all this stuff. It feels not dissimilar to the early Vital Farms days when we had all this crap to say. We need to distill it down in the most kind of a cogent way, and it's, digestible. But anyway, yeah, it has to taste great. It has to be in a format that is not off-putting. It also, the education obviously is going to be central to, why the hell should I do that? We kind of think of insects in a certain way, and we're actually kind of unique on the global stage, or compared to many other cultures across the globe, for whom this is already just a very natural food source. It's on the planet here with us, and you don't have to be naked and afraid to take advantage of some humble but very powerful protein here. And yeah, don't have all the answers yet, but that's kind of the core of the job. And then, we're also standing up all of the other stuff you need just as a company to go do things well in the CPG space, both grocery and D2C. We're primarily D2C now, but the bars have been in HEB for almost a year and a half now. About a third of the HEBs out there are going to have our protein bars and energy as of this month, actually. So
congratulations.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
HEB, it's there's a Texas connection there, but they deserve a lot of credit. They're kind of a mainstream grocer, but they're way better than, they're progressive and very forward thinking. And we just had an amazing call that was so helpful with our buyer just yesterday. We were having some real talk, like, hey, it would be great if your economics were a little bit better, about the purpose, but you need to provide us, the dollars and cents. And so it's a good thing we've been working to go improve, our supply chain and how we manufacture and our cost structure, so that we can have great answers to those questions when they come. Because you can be real special, but a slot on a grocery shelf is kind of priceless for that retailer. And so really this comes full circle. If you think of a stakeholder model or a consciously capitalistic way of moving through all this, it has to be good for everybody, whether it's a farmer, an animal, the consumer, your HEB buyer. He needs to look good, or she, just in our case, it's a he, but they need to, you gotta be careful, Day.
Yeah,
that's true.
It has to benefit everyone to be viable or viable. Think about that.
We're huge HEB fans.
Love
and
HEB.
Stakeholder model fans.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks, Jason,
Yeah,
for joining
fun.
us. It was so nice to hear your expertise. And do you want to tell everybody where you can find Exo?
Well, we're
besides
primarily
HEB.
D2C, but all your usual online channels, be they our website or Amazon. And we're in about a third of the HEBs today. We're in every Cost Plus World market that there is. They've been a great partner as well. It's actually a really great account that is kind of non-typical, but it's a really great one.
Cool.
Yeah, a lot of other mom and pops and stuff, but we're working to drive our grocery presence and get that door count up. And we've been doing a lot of work, in the online space too, to, better target folks and to be able to cut everybody good deals for trying what we've got. So hope everybody does.
Yep, and they are delicious, so don't let the crickets scare you.
Yeah, get over it. It's just food.
Get over it already. Shoot. Well,
That's probably not a good tagline.
Get over it already.
Yeah.
No.
You don't need to pay us for that. That's free advice.
Well, hey, y'all, congratulations on UMAI. And I know for a fact from just being out there in the space that y'all are kicking tail out there. And it's so cool to see, you can stand up food brands. You can also stand up companies like what you've done. And you're to be commended for that. You're providing a great value, and it's doing well by y'all as well. And yeah, it's a great space, but congratulations on your success there at UMAI, and keep doing what you're doing. It's going to be fun to see how y'all track as well.
Thanks, Jason. Hey, you get a lot of credit for starting this. So
all those lunches, we owe you lunch again too, probably.
Probably.
once this is all over with.
Did we get arrested for going to a restaurant?
Probably.
I know. We're sitting very close to each
Yeah.
other right now, so
Yeah, I may call the authorities.
stay safe. Stay safe out there.
Wearing a headset, so
Yeah, we disinfected it though.
Yeah.
So
We're clean.
no doubt. Thank you all for having me. I sure appreciate it.
thank you.
Yeah, enjoyed it, and congrats.
Thanks, Jason. We'll talk to you soon.
UMAI Social Circle is a CPG agency-driven podcast based out of Austin, Texas. We're excited to share more behind-the-scene insights, chats with industry leaders, and whatever else we learn along the way. Follow us on Instagram at UMAI Marketing or check out our website, umaimarketing.com. Catch you back here soon.